My son William sent me a message on my 65th birthday saying, "Mom, we have more important things to do." I was sitting at the dining table surrounded by golden balloons and a chocolate cake I had made myself, as I had every year since his father's passing, 15 years ago. The next morning, 51 missed calls filled my phone. They tried to contact me 51 times after I announced the sale of the house I had bought for them, without warning. But as I counted each missed call with the same coldness with which I signed the sale papers, I relived the beginning of the story. It was a Tuesday in October when I decided to organize my birthday. I planned everything for weeks. I bought the ingredients for William's favorite cake, the appetizers he'd loved since childhood. I even had my mother's dining table restored. The house smelled of cinnamon and vanilla when I finished baking the cake. I laid out embroidered tablecloths, linen napkins reserved for special occasions, and flowers from the garden in the center of the table. Everything perfect, as I had always wished it to be when my family came to visit. At 6 p.m., the table was set for 4 people: William, his wife Veronica, my granddaughter Maria, and me. I prepared herb-roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, fresh salad, and the rolls that Veronica loved so much. The golden light of sunset streamed through the dining room windows, creating the cozy atmosphere that always made me feel all was right with the world. I lit the candles, put on soft music, and waited. 6:30, 7:30. The chicken was getting cold. The candles were almost burned out, and I was still sitting in my chair in my blue dress, bought especially for the occasion, staring at the door, at every noise from the street. At 8 p.m., I decided to call. The phone rang 5 times before William answered with a distracted voice, as if he were doing other things while talking to me. "Mom, sorry, but we can't make it. Something came up with Veronica's work, and Maria has a school project due tomorrow. We'll celebrate another day," he said in a monotone voice, as if he were canceling a doctor's appointment, not my birthday party. Before I could respond, he hung up. I sat in silence for a long time, phone in hand, looking at the impeccably set table, which now looked like an empty theater stage. The candles were still burning. The food was still warm, but the house was filled with a painful silence, more anguishing than any scream. That's when I received the message. "Mom, we have more important things to do. No proper apology, no belated happy birthday." Just that cold phrase that lodged in my chest like a knife. That night, as I put away the food in plastic containers and blew out the spent candles, I didn't cry. Something strange was happening inside me, something that took me days to identify. It wasn't sadness, but a cold awakening, like when you realize you've been living a dream and suddenly open your eyes to reality. 100 kilometers away, sitting on my new porch, I clearly perceived the moments I ignored, the strange conversations I let pass, the looks exchanged between William and Veronica when they thought I wasn't watching. For months, maybe years, I had been blind, believing I was the perfect grandmother and mother-in-law, always available, never saying no. It all began 6 months before my birthday, in April, when William came home with folders full of papers and the smile he used to wear as a child when he wanted something. "Mom, I have a proposal you're going to love," he said, settling onto the couch while Veronica stood by the window with an expression I now understand as disguised impatience. "We found the perfect house for us, but we need your help with the financing," William continued, extending his hands in a familiar gesture. "It's a unique opportunity, Mom. A house in the best neighborhood, with a garden for Maria, near good schools." His eyes shone with genuine emotion I hadn't seen in him for years. My mother's heart melted immediately. The house cost 150,000 reais, They had saved $30,000, but needed me to cover the remaining $120,000. Just temporarily, Veronica insisted, finally approaching the couch with a smile I now recognize as calculated. In 6 months, we'll pay everything back with interest. William had just gotten a promotion at the company, and Veronica had several confirmed decoration projects. I didn't hesitate. That same day we went to the bank. I withdrew my life savings from working as a secretary, cleaning houses on weekends, and selling tamales at neighborhood parties. All that silent sacrifice was handed over without thinking twice, because I saw happiness in my son's eyes, because I wanted my granddaughter to grow up in a beautiful house, because I believed this is what mothers do, give everything for their children's happiness. But there was something else. William asked me to sign some documents to expedite the legal procedures. "You know how these processes are, Mom," he explained while I signed document after document, without reading them completely. "It's just so everything is properly registered and to avoid problems with the IRS." His voice sounded so confident, so professional, that I trusted completely. After all, he worked at a real estate agency. He knew more about these things than I did. The first months after the purchase were beautiful. William called weekly to tell me about the improvements to the house, sending photos of the garden and Maria's decorated room. Veronica even invited me to lunch a few times, showing me furniture catalogs and asking my opinion on paint colors. I felt included, important, useful. But after my birthday, something changed radically. The calls became scarce, distant. When I called, they were always busy, always in a hurry. There was always something more urgent to attend to. "We'll call you back, Mom." This phrase became common in our conversations, a promise rarely kept. It was Maria, unknowingly, who gave me the first real clue about what was happening. My 16-year-old granddaughter on a Saturday afternoon, with eyes red from crying and an expression of confusion that broke my heart, showed up at my house. "Grandma," she said, sitting at the kitchen table where we had done homework together so many times, "why are Mom and Dad talking about selling your house? Your house, not our house. Not the house we bought together. Your house," Maria said. The world stopped for an instant, like when you're watching a movie, and someone pauses the image at the exact moment when the whole story changes. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, while inside I felt something breaking. "Yesterday, I heard Dad talking on the phone with someone," Maria continued, nervously fidgeting with her hands. "He said there was already a buyer for Grandma Inés's house, and they would close the deal next week." She paused, looking at me with those big, worried eyes she had inherited from her grandfather. "But Grandma, isn't it your house? Why are they selling it without asking you?" In that moment, sitting in my kitchen with my granddaughter, I realized I had been the world's biggest fool. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until 4 in the morning, sitting on the bed with all the papers I had signed 6 months earlier spread across the bedspread, trying to understand the words that now took on a completely different meaning. A bedside lamp cast strange shadows on the documents, and the more I read, the more my blood ran cold. It wasn't just about buying a house. According to the papers before me, I had transferred complete ownership to William and Veronica's names. My signature was on every page, authorizing the total transfer of 120,000 reais, not as a loan, but as a gift. I had signed documents that made them the sole legal owners of the property. I wasn't a co-owner. I had no rights to that house. Officially, in this transaction, I existed only as the person who had handed over the money. I got up from bed like a sleepwalker and went to my computer. My hands trembled as I typed the house address into the search engine. What I found took my breath away. There it was. House for sale, excellent opportunity. Price, 180,000 reais. The photos showed the house I had paid for, with improvements and decorations that had clearly cost a fortune. The garden looked stunning, with new plants and an automatic irrigation system. The kitchen had been completely remodeled with stainless steel appliances. The floors had been replaced with Italian marble. But what hurt me most was reading the description. Beautiful family home, sold due to owner's relocation. Not a single mention that this house had been paid for, with the life savings of a 65-year-old woman. Not a word about the sacrifice, about the nights I spent sewing to save that money, about the weekends I cleaned offices to provide this opportunity. I continued investigating like a private detective in a mystery movie. I found Veronica's Facebook page, which had been constantly updated with photos of the house, presenting it as our perfect home and the result of so much effort and savings. In one particularly elaborate post, she wrote, "Thank God and our hard work, we finally have our dream home. Everything is possible with dedication." The comments were full of congratulations from friends and family, who obviously didn't know the truth. But there was more. Much more. On Instagram, William had posted photos of a new car, a silver sedan that cost at least 40,000 reais. In the still active stories, I could see photos of expensive restaurants, a beach weekend with designer clothes, all paid for with money they were supposedly going to pay me back in 6 months. At 5 in the morning, as the sun began to rise through my window, I made a decision that would change everything. I would confront them, but not as the hurt and confused mother I had been until that moment. I would arrive prepared with evidence, with specific questions, with the coldness of someone who had finally opened their eyes. I took a shower, put on my best navy blue suit, the one I wore for important occasions, and carefully applied my makeup. I wanted to look strong, dignified, like the woman who had worked all her life and deserved respect. At 8 o'clock sharp, I was ringing the doorbell of the house I had paid for, but which no longer legally belonged to me. Veronica opened the door in a bathrobe, a cup of coffee in hand, and an expression of surprise that quickly transformed into something resembling guilt. "Inés, what a surprise so early," she said without inviting me in, partially blocking the entrance with her body. "William already left for work. Did you need something specific?" "Yes," I replied with a calm that surprised me. "I need to talk about the sale of my house." Her face instantly paled and the coffee cup trembled slightly in her hand. "And I also want you to explain where the money came from. For the new car, the beach vacation, and all that renovation I saw in the kitchen." In that moment, I realized she knew that I knew, and I also realized the war had barely begun. Veronica finally let me in, but her attitude had completely changed. She was no longer the smiling daughter-in-law who asked me for decorating advice. Now she walked in front of me with quick, nervous steps, leading me to the living room while shouting upstairs, "Maria, hurry up or you'll be late for school." Her voice sounded forced, as if she were acting in a poorly rehearsed play. The house was unrecognizable, not just from the improvements I had seen in the photos, but from how they had organized everything. My eyes took in every detail. The Italian leather sofa that cost more than my 3 months' salary, the giant screen TV mounted on the wall, the original paintings I recognized from an expensive gallery downtown. All paid for with my money, while they told me they barely had enough for basic expenses. "Look, Inés," Veronica began, sitting on the edge of the expensive sofa. I know this might seem confusing, but everything is perfectly legal. The papers you signed. The papers I signed under false pretenses. I interrupted, keeping my voice steady, though inside I felt my heart beating like a war drum. The papers. I signed believing it was a temporary loan, not a permanent gift. Her expression changed immediately. The mask of false concern fell away, revealing something much colder, more calculated. "You can't prove that," she said, crossing her arms. "Your signature was on all the documents. No one forced you to do anything." At that moment, Maria came down the stairs with her school backpack, and the tension in the room was palpable. My granddaughter watched us, clearly sensing something was wrong, but not understanding exactly what. "Hi, Grandma," she said, approaching to give me a kiss on the cheek. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect, sweetheart," I replied, hugging her and breathing in the strawberry shampoo scent that always perfumed her hair. "I'm just talking with your mother about some adult matters." After Maria went to school, the conversation became more direct. Veronica no longer pretended. "Look, Inés, the situation is simple. The house is legally ours. You decided to help us, and that was very generous of you. But now we need to sell it because we have other plans." "Other plans?" I asked, feeling anger beginning to boil in my stomach. "William got a job opportunity in Guadalajara. It's an important promotion with a much better salary. We're moving there next month." She paused, analyzing my reaction. "With the sale of this house, we'll have enough money to buy something better there and start a new life. A new life with my money, without consulting me, without even saying goodbye properly. And me, what happens to me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You have your house, your retirement. You're well established here. We're young. We need to think about our future, Maria's future." Her voice sounded as if she were explaining something obvious to a foolish child. "You can't expect us to stay here forever just because you want to have family nearby." That phrase was like a slap in the face. After everything I had done for them, after handing over my life savings, I was the selfish one for wanting to keep the family together. I was the one who didn't understand they had more important things to do. But what hurt me most came next. Veronica stood up from the sofa and walked to the window, turning her back to me, as if I were no longer important in this conversation. "Besides, Inés, I think it's time you understand you're not so young anymore. Living alone at your age can be dangerous. Maybe you should consider moving to a retirement home where they can take proper care of you." The silence that followed was deafening. I, who had worked until I was 60, who kept my house immaculate, who cooked for the whole family every Sunday, who tended my garden and paid all my bills on time. Suddenly, I was an invalid old woman who needed to be institutionalized. I stood up from the sofa with all the dignity I could muster. "I understand the situation perfectly," I said, walking toward the door. "You've made your decisions, and now I'll make mine." When I reached the entrance, I turned one last time. "Oh, and Veronica, one more thing. This conversation has clarified many things for me, especially about the kind of people you really are. I left that house for the last time without looking back, but in my mind, the first elements of a plan they would never see coming were already forming." That same afternoon, while they believed I was at home crying like a defeated old woman, I was sitting in the office of attorney Esteban Morales, the best family law specialist in the city. His office smelled of old books and strong coffee, and the walls were covered with diplomas and certificates that spoke of 40 years dedicated to defending complex cases. Mrs. Inés, this is a classic case of family financial abuse. Unfortunately, it's more common than you might think," the attorney declared as he meticulously analyzed the presented documents. His glasses slipped slightly down his nose as he examined each page with the precision of a surgeon. "The good news is that we have several legal options." I explained everything to him. The broken promises, the lies about the temporary loan, the deception about the documents I signed, the expensive improvements made with money they supposedly didn't have, and especially the conversation that morning, which made it clear that everything had been planned from the beginning. "Is there anything that can be done?" I asked, feeling for the first time in days a small glimmer of hope. Attorney Esteban smiled in a way that reminded me of my father when he had an ace up his sleeve in dominoes. "Ma'am, not only is there something we can do, there are several things we will do, and all completely legal." He opened a new folder and began writing quickly. "First, we'll initiate proceedings for fraud and manipulation. Second, we'll request an investigation into all recently acquired assets. And third," he paused, looking me directly in the eyes with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Third what?" I asked. "Third, I need you to tell me exactly everything you remember about purchasing that house. Every detail, every conversation, every promise they made to you. Because I suspect there are more irregularities than what appears in these documents." For the next 2 hours, we reconstructed the entire story from the beginning. The attorney took constant notes, asked specific questions, and occasionally raised his eyebrows, as if he had discovered something important. When I finished telling everything, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Mrs. Inés, what you've told me constitutes not just civil fraud, but possibly criminal fraud. Your son and daughter-in-law could face criminal charges." He paused, studying my reaction. "Are you prepared to go all the way?" For the first time in months, I felt completely confident about something. "Attorney, for 40 years I worked hard to save that money. I cleaned houses, sewed clothes, sold food, deprived myself of vacations and luxuries to be able to leave something for my family. If they decided to rob me and treat me like a fool, then they'll meet the woman I really am." That night, following Attorney Esteban's precise instructions, I began my own investigation. I created fake profiles on social networks to follow all the content William and Veronica had posted in recent months. What I discovered kept me awake, but not from sadness, rather from pure indignation. Not only had they flaunted the lifestyle they led with my money, but they had also spoken badly of me publicly in a private Facebook group called Maria's School, Moms. Veronica had posted several disparaging comments about controlling mothers-in-law and mothers who don't know when to let their adult children go. In one particularly cruel post, she wrote, "My mother-in-law thinks that because she helped us financially, she has the right to have a say in our decisions. Some parents don't understand that their children have grown up." But the worst came when I found a video William had posted on Instagram 2 weeks after my birthday. It was a video of him and Veronica toasting with expensive champagne at a sophisticated restaurant. And the text said, "When you finally free yourself from toxic family expectations, you can live your own life, a new beginning, without drama." The video, recorded with my money at a meal whose cost exceeded my monthly food budget, celebrated their liberation after stealing my years of savings. That night, alone at home, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened a bottle of wine saved for special occasions. I poured myself a glass and toasted to myself. To me, the woman who will show them what it really means to have more important things to do. I said aloud, savoring each sip as if it were the first of my new life. The next day, Attorney Esteban called me early. "Mrs. Inés, I have news. Great news. It seems your son and daughter-in-law made a serious mistake. Explain," I asked, with a voice that sounded like heavenly music to my ears. "When registering the property sale, they did so before the minimum legal deadline for family transfers. Technically, the sale is void until 6 complete months have passed after the original transfer." My heart raced. What does that mean exactly? It means that, as the original donor, you have the legal right to revoke the transfer and recover the property within the next 48 hours. After that, the current buyer would have acquired rights. His voice became more serious. "Mrs. Inés, if we're going to act, we have to act now. I didn't think twice. Do it. Do whatever is necessary." The following hours were a whirlwind of papers, signatures, and phone calls. Attorney Esteban mobilized contacts in public records, in the courts, and even in the real estate agency that had authorized the original sale. By 6 p.m. that same day, the house was legally back in my name. But the real masterstroke came next. "We'll sell this property immediately, before they know what happened," he said with a smile that would make any opposing attorney tremble. "I have a client looking for exactly this type of house and is willing to pay 190,000 reais in cash, closing tomorrow morning." That night I didn't sleep, not from anxiety, but from pure adrenaline. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The power to take control of my own life. While they slept peacefully in the house they believed they had sold, I was awake, planning my perfect revenge. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I was back in Attorney Esteban's office, signing the sale documents. The buyer was a young entrepreneur who needed to move urgently for professional reasons, and had paid the full price without haggling or asking for discounts. By 10 o'clock in the morning, 190,000 reais were deposited in my bank account. Now what? I asked the attorney, feeling a mixture of triumph and nervousness. "Now we wait," he replied, carefully filing all the documents in a folder marked with my name. "The law requires us to officially notify them of the change in ownership. This notification will arrive at their house this afternoon." I decided to have lunch at a fancy restaurant downtown, one of those places I had never dared to enter because they seemed too expensive. I ordered the most expensive dish on the menu, a bottle of white wine, and dessert. For the first time in years, I felt deep satisfaction at being in charge of my life. I felt like an important woman, someone who deserved respect and consideration. While I savored my meal, my phone began to vibrate. First, a text message from William. "Mom, we need to talk urgently. Come home right now." Then another. "Mom, answer the phone. This is serious. Something is happening with the house." I didn't respond to any. Instead, I ordered coffee and a piece of chocolate cake and sat, enjoying my lunch while the phone rang incessantly. By 3 p.m., I had 23 missed calls and 18 text messages, each more desperate than the last. "Mom, please, we need to talk. We don't understand what's happening. The notary says we're no longer the owners. Mom, answer, please." Finally, I decided to answer. Not out of compassion, but because I wanted to hear their voices when they realized the naive and defenseless mother they thought they could manipulate no longer existed. "Hello, William," I said in a calm tone that surprised me. "Mom, thank God you answered. Where are you? We need you to come right now. There's a huge problem with the house." "There's no problem," I replied, sipping my coffee. The house was sold, this morning, as planned. The silence on the other end of the line was so prolonged I thought the call had dropped. "What did you say?" he finally asked with a voice I barely recognized. I said the house was sold for 190,000 reis. A good price, don't you think? But, Mom, that's our house. We had already sold it. We have a signed contract. They had a signed contract, I corrected. But it turned out that contract was illegal. And since the house legally became mine again, I decided to sell it to whoever I wanted. What followed were 10 minutes of screaming, pleading, threats, and finally, the most pathetic crying I had ever heard in my life. William, my 35-year-old son, crying like a 5-year-old child because his perfect plan had crumbled. When I hung up the phone, I sat in that elegant restaurant, surrounded by the murmur of others' conversations and the soft clink of silverware against plates, and for the first time in months, I truly smiled. At 5 p.m., I was back at my house, packing a suitcase with the essentials. Attorney Esteban had been clear. Mrs. Inés, after what we did today, they'll try everything to pressure you. I recommend you leave town for a few days until the situation calms down. He didn't need to tell me twice. I had already booked a room in a small, quiet hotel, 3 hours away, in a mountain town where no one knew me. While I carefully folded my clothes, I heard the sound of a car braking sharply in front of my house. Through the window, I saw William's silver sedan, the one they bought with my money. The doors opened violently, and out came him and Veronica, followed by Maria, who had clearly been crying. Their footsteps echoed like hammers against the concrete of the garden as they approached my door. The pounding began before they could even ring the doorbell. "Mom, open the door right now," William shouted with a voice I hadn't heard since he was a rebellious teenager. "We know you're in there. We need to talk." I didn't move from the bedroom. I continued packing my suitcase with slow, deliberate movements, folding each piece of clothing as if it were the most important thing in the world. Each knock on the door, each scream, each desperate plea only confirmed that I had made the right decision. "Inés, please." Now it was Veronica's voice, but it no longer sounded like the polite and manipulative daughter-in-law she always was. It sounded like a woman on the verge of hysteria. "You can't do this! We have rights! We have a contract with the buyer." Maria remained silent, but I could hear her quiet sobs through the door. This hurt me more than all the screams combined, but not enough to change my mind. If my granddaughter was suffering, it was her parents' fault, not mine. For half an hour, they continued knocking, screaming, begging. William went so far as to shout, "Mom, if you don't open up, we'll have to call the police. This is theft. This is illegal." That's when I decided to respond. I approached the door without opening it, and spoke loud enough for them to hear me clearly. "William, if you want to call the police, go ahead. I have all the legal documents proving the house was mine, and that the sale you made was illegal. I also have proof of all the money you spent, which you said you didn't have." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Maria stopped crying for a moment. "Furthermore," I continued, "if you call the police, I'll also have to show the screenshots of all the posts where you show off the lifestyle you lead with the money you stole from me, including that beautiful video where you celebrate getting rid of me." I heard Veronica whisper something that sounded like, "I didn't know she had seen that," and William responded with a word I won't repeat. "Grandma," Maria said in a small, broken voice, "I didn't know anything about this. Please don't be mad at me." My heart broke in two. I opened the door just a crack and saw my granddaughter with red, swollen eyes, standing between her parents like a hostage in a war she didn't start. "My love," I said, "I could never be mad at you. This is between the adults. You're not to blame for anything." That's when William completely lost control. Stop manipulating my daughter. You're the one destroying this family. All we did was for our future. Her future. Her future? I asked, opening the door completely and looking him in the eyes for the first time in days. Her future built on lies, theft, and disrespect to the woman who gave you life? That's the future you want? Veronica stepped forward with an expression that tried to be threatening, but only managed to look desperate. Inés, you don't understand the consequences of what you've done. We already had that money committed. We have debts to pay. We have the job in Guadalajara waiting for us. That's not my problem, I replied with a coldness that surprised even me. You made your plans without consulting me, spent money that wasn't yours, and lied to me for months. Now face the consequences. William looked at me with an expression that mixed fury, disbelief, and something it took me a moment to recognize. Fear. Mom, are you really going to destroy your own family over money? I didn't destroy anything, I replied. You destroyed trust, destroyed respect, destroyed the love I had for this family when you decided to treat me like a fool. I just picked up the pieces of my dignity. I left them in my garden and closed the door. I finished packing my things, called a taxi, and left home without looking back. In the taxi, as I watched my neighborhood, my house, my previous life receding through the window, I felt like a butterfly that had just emerged from its cocoon. The hotel in the mountains was exactly what I needed. Small, quiet, with a stunning view of the valley and staff who didn't ask questions. My room had a balcony with 2 wicker chairs and a small table where I could have my breakfast while contemplating a postcard-worthy landscape. For the first time in months, I was in no hurry to do anything. I didn't need to cook for anyone but myself. I didn't need to worry about others' needs. In the first 2 days, my phone didn't stop ringing. 51 missed calls the first day, 37 the second. The messages had become increasingly dramatic and desperate. William went from fury to pleas for mercy, and finally to veiled threats. Veronica alternated between false apologies and direct attacks on my character. But there were other messages, too, from unknown numbers. On the 3rd day, I decided to read some of these unknown messages. One of them chilled my blood. Mrs. Inés, I am Attorney Fernandez, legal representative of the Herrera family. My client is very interested in reaching an out-of-court settlement regarding the property issue. Please contact me urgently. Another said, Mrs. Inés, we are a media company. We would like to interview you about the family conflict that has gone viral on social media. We can offer financial compensation for your testimony. Viral on social media? My heart began to beat faster. I opened Facebook and Instagram on my phone and searched for Veronica's name. What I found took my breath away. She had posted a 40-minute video on her Facebook page titled, When a Mother Destroys Her Own Family Over Money. In the video, Veronica appeared crying dramatically, with Maria by her side also crying, telling a completely distorted version of events. According to her account, I was a greedy old woman who had manipulated legal documents to steal their house after they generously included me in the purchase. My mother-in-law forced us to put the house in her name because she said we would get better credit terms that way, Veronica said between theatrical sobs. We trusted her because she's family. We paid for everything with our own resources, worked day and night on improvements, and now she says the house was hers and sold it without telling us anything. The video had over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments, most supporting Veronica and condemning me as a toxic mother-in-law and an abusive old woman. They had managed to present me as the villain of the story, as a cruel woman who destroyed a young family out of pure malice. But what hurt me most was seeing Maria in the video, my granddaughter with eyes swollen from crying, saying between sobs, "My grandmother was always good to me. I don't understand why she's doing this. We just want her to give us back our house so we can move to Guadalajara, as we planned." The video had been shared thousands of times and had already reached local radio programs and gossip blogs. In the comments, people speculated about my mental state, suggested I was senile or manipulated by third parties. Some people even suggested a fundraising campaign to help this family, supposedly victims of family abuse. I got out of the hotel bed and went to the balcony. The fresh mountain air helped me calm down and think clearly. I immediately called attorney Esteban. "Mrs. Inés, several media outlets had already contacted us, wanting information about the case." He replied before I could explain what I had seen. "I recommend you don't make any public statements for now. They're playing the victim card, but we have something better. Documented truth." "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling suddenly very tired. "I mean, I have all the evidence of what really happened. The original documents, where it clearly states you were the sole owner, the screenshots of all their posts showing off expenses, the exact dates that demonstrate they lied about their income, and something else I discovered yesterday." "What else?" "Your son and daughter-in-law applied for a bank loan of 50th res, using the house as collateral 3 days before the sale to the first buyer. Technically, they were committing bank fraud, in addition to deceiving you. This information changed everything. It was no longer just a family dispute, but a case of fraud with serious criminal consequences." "Doctor?" I said, feeling overcome by a strange calm. "I believe it's time for the truth to come to light." "Are you sure?" "Once we start the full legal process, there's no turning back." I looked at the valley from my balcony, where the afternoon sun painted the mountains in golden tones, and thought about all the years I had worked in silence, all the sacrifices in silence, all the love in silence. The time had come for my voice to be heard. "I'm sure," I replied. "Do whatever is necessary." 3 months later, I was sitting on the porch of my new house, in a coastal town 4 hours away from my old life, watching the sunrise over the ocean while drinking my morning coffee. The house was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, with an ocean view, and a garden where I planted roses, lavender, and aromatic herbs. I bought it with the money from the sale, and still had enough to live comfortably for many years. The legal process had ended the previous week. William and Veronica were charged with bank fraud and sentenced to pay a significant fine and perform community service. The job in Guadalajara evaporated when the company learned of the legal scandal. Veronica's viral video was removed after attorney Esteban presented the real evidence of the case, and several media outlets that had reproduced the story had to publish retractions. But my victory wasn't announced with fanfare. It was lived in silence, as true victory should be. Maria had sent me a letter 2 weeks earlier, a handwritten letter of 6 pages, where she apologized for participating in the video without knowing the whole truth. "Grandma," she wrote in her careful teenage handwriting, "I now understand that my parents lied to me about many things. I didn't know you had paid for the house completely. I didn't know they had deceived you with the documents. I didn't know they had spent your money on unnecessary things. I feel terrible for appearing in that video saying things that weren't true." The letter continued explaining that Maria, determined to break away from the toxic environment in her home, had decided to live with her Aunt Norma, Veronica's sister. The constant fighting, accusations, and being unfairly blamed for all her parents' problems were suffocating her. She knew, however, that her parents had gotten themselves into this whirlwind. At the end of her letter, Maria wrote, "I know you probably don't want to know anything about this family anymore, and I would completely understand, but if you ever forgive me and want to see me, I'll be waiting. I love you, Grandma, and I'm sorry for everything we put you through." That letter made me cry for the first time in months, but not from sadness, rather from relief. My granddaughter, the only innocent one in this story, had managed to see the truth for herself. I immediately responded to Maria, inviting her to visit me at my new house during summer vacation. I wanted to show her my garden, cook with her in my new kitchen, walk together on the beach at sunset. I wanted to demonstrate that true love survives lies and manipulation. William never apologized. In the last messages before I changed my phone number, he continued to blame me for destroying the family and being a selfish mother. Veronica tried to contact me through social networks, alternating messages between dramatic apologies and veiled threats. I blocked all her profiles. I didn't feel hatred for them. The most surprising thing about this whole process was discovering that, after all the suffering and betrayal, what I felt for my son and his wife wasn't hatred, but a kind of peaceful indifference. They had shown themselves to be people I couldn't trust, people willing to hurt those who loved them for money and convenience. And when you know someone's true nature, you can't love them the same way. Finishing my coffee, I got up to water the plants in my garden. The roses had begun to bloom, and the scent of lavender mixed with the salty sea breeze. As I watered each plant carefully, I reflected on the woman I had been 6 months earlier. Invisible, compliant, always willing to sacrifice herself for a family that considered her disposable. That woman no longer existed. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who had recovered her dignity, who had learned that self-love is more important than others' approval, a woman who had discovered that sometimes, to save what really matters, you need the courage to leave everything behind. That afternoon, while preparing dinner in my kitchen overlooking the sea, the doorbell rang. It was the mailman with a small package for me. There was no sender, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Maria. Inside was a framed photo of the two of us, taken on my birthday the previous year, when everything seemed normal and happy. On the back, in her careful handwriting, was written, "To the bravest grandmother in the world. Thank you for teaching me that defending yourself isn't selfishness, it's survival." I placed the photo on the kitchen window shelf where I could see it while cooking. Then I turned on the radio, put on soft music, and continued preparing my dinner. Alone, but not empty, at peace after the storm. That night, before going to sleep, I opened the bedroom windows to listen to the sound of waves against the shore. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without worries, without anguish, without fear. I had conquered something more valuable than money or possessions. I had recovered my life. 2 years later, the sound of the doorbell at my beachside house no longer startled me, as it had at first. I had learned to appreciate unexpected visits. The fresh fish vendor who came by every Tuesday. Mrs. Elena, who lived 2 houses down and had become my afternoon tea companion. Or the neighborhood children who came asking for oranges from my tree in the garden. But that Saturday morning when I opened the door, I was met with a surprise that took my breath away. Maria stood at my doorstep, but she was no longer the confused and hurt teenager who had visited me during vacation. She was a young woman of 18 with a radiant smile and a suitcase in hand. "Hi, Grandma," she said, and her voice sounded different, more mature, more confident. I've come to ask a big favor." I had her come in and made coffee while she settled on the living room sofa, the same place where we had spent so many hours during her previous visits, talking about life, about her parents' mistakes, about her dreams of studying veterinary medicine and working with marine animals. I got a full scholarship to study marine biology at the university in the capital, she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "It's everything I've always wanted, Grandma. But the university is only an hour from here, and I was wondering if I could stay with you while I study. I promise not to be a bother. I can help with expenses by working on weekends. I can cook, clean." I didn't let her finish. I stood up from the sofa and hugged her with a strength that surprised me. "My love," I said, feeling tears gathering in my eyes. "This house feels empty without you. Of course you can stay." While helping Maria arrange her things in the room that had been waiting for her for 2 years, she told me about her life with Aunt Norma, about how she had finished high school with excellent grades, how she had worked part-time at a veterinary clinic to save money, and about something that broke my heart. It had been over a year since she had spoken to her parents. After everything that happened, they tried to manipulate me to help them get money from you, she explained, while hanging her clothes in the closet. "They asked me to write letters asking you to give them a second chance, to lend them money, for a new business. When I refused, they started treating me like I was the enemy." Maria sat on the bed and looked at me with a sadness I hadn't seen in her eyes for a long time. "Grandma, do you think I'm a bad person for not wanting to have a relationship with my parents?" I sat beside her and took her hands. "My girl," I said, "sometimes the families we choose are more important than the families we're born into. You chose honesty over blind loyalty. You chose your future over their manipulation. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a strong person." That night, I prepared a special meal to celebrate Maria coming to live with me. While we cooked together in my small kitchen, I realized something beautiful. In the 2 years I had lived alone, I had learned to be happy by myself. But having Maria back didn't bring me a feeling of dependence or need. Maria's presence ignited in me a different sense of fullness, like the joy of sharing something valuable, rather than searching for something I lacked. During dinner, Maria told me about her academic plans, her dream of working in marine conservation, and her hope of making a difference in the world. I listened to her, absorbing every word with the same admiration I felt when, as a child, she told me about the books she read. But now her passion had direction and purpose. "There's something I've never told you, but I think about every day," Maria said, while we washed the dishes together. "What is it, my love?" "Thank you for teaching me that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to set boundaries, that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family." She paused, carefully drying a plate before continuing. "If I hadn't seen how you defended yourself, I don't think I would have ever had the courage to walk away from my parents when they also became toxic to me." That night, after Maria went to sleep in her room, I went out to the porch with a cup of chamomile tea and sat contemplating the ocean under the full moon. The sound of the waves was now my favorite music, a constant symphony that reminded me that life, like the sea, is always in motion, always changing, always offering new possibilities. I thought about the woman I had been 4 years earlier sitting at an empty birthday table waiting for a family that never came. That woman had been broken by betrayal, but from that fracture someone completely new had been born. A woman who knew that true love doesn't require sacrificing one's own dignity, that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not family obligation. My phone vibrated with a message. It was from Mrs. Elena, my neighbor, who had seen Maria arrive that morning. "What joy to see your granddaughter back. Tomorrow I'll bring a cake to celebrate. It's beautiful to see a family that truly loves each other." Those words resonated in my mind as I finished my tea. For years I had believed that loving family meant enduring anything, forgiving any abuse, sacrificing anything to maintain unity. Now I knew that true love requires boundaries, respect, and the courage to walk away when necessary. Maria and I were a small family, but real. A family built on mutual choice, on genuine affection, on the shared desire to grow and be better people. We didn't need anyone else to be complete. Before going inside, I cast one last look at the ocean. Tomorrow would begin a new stage, being the grandmother who supports her granddaughter's dreams, the woman who had found peace after the storm, the person who learned that sometimes, to save what really matters, you need the courage to leave everything behind. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future.